Hello everyone and welcome to CGTN special coverage of China's political season, the two sessions. Live from Beijing, I'm Zhong Shi. The 14th National People's Congress is now holding the fifth plenary meeting of its first session, during which they will decide on candidates for vice premiers, state councilors, ministers in charge of various commissions, central bank governor, the auditor general, and the secretary general of the state council, as well as leaders and members of 8 special committees of the NPC. Our special coverage is also being live streamed on our social media platforms. Log on in our app to stay updated. And joining me today in the studio are Professor Xia Lu from the School of Marxism Studies at Renmin University and Einar Tangen, Independent Political and Economics Affairs Commentator. Welcome to our program, gentlemen.
Thank you.
First, let's get the latest from the Great Hall of the People. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has just nominated Ding Xuexiang, He Lifeng, Zhang Guoqing, and Liu Guozhong as the candidates for vice premiers. He has also nominated Li Shangfu, Wang Xiaohong, Wu Zhenglong, Shen Yiqin, and Qin Gang as the candidates for state councilors. Premier Li Qiang has also nominated other members of the state council. The nominated candidates are Wu Zhenglong as candidate for Secretary General of the State Council, Qin Gang as candidate for Minister of Foreign Affairs, Li Shangfu as candidate for Minister of National Defense, Zheng Shanjie as candidate for Director of the National Development and Reform Commission, Huai Jinpeng as candidate for Minister of Education, Wang Zhigang as candidate for Minister of Science and Technology, Jin Zhuanglong as candidate for Minister of Industry and Information Technology, Pan Yue as candidate for Director of National Ethnic Affairs Commission, Wang Xiaohong as candidate for Minister of Public Security, Chen Yixing as candidate for Minister of State Security, Tang Dengjie as candidate for Minister of Civil Affairs, He Rong as candidate for Minister of Justice, Liu Kun as candidate for Minister of Finance, Wang Xiaoping as candidate for Minister of Human Resources and Social Security, Wang Guanghua as candidate for Minister of Natural Resources, Huang Renqiu as candidate for Minister of Ecology and Environment, Ni Hong as candidate for Minister of Housing and Urban Rural Development, Li Xiaopeng as candidate for Minister of Transport, Li Guoying as candidate for Minister of Water Resources, Pang Renjian as candidate for Minister of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, Wang Wentao as candidate for Minister of Commerce, Hu Heping as candidate for Minister of Culture and Tourism, Ma Xiaowei as candidate for Director of National Health Commission, Pei Jinjia as candidate for Minister of Veteran Affairs, Wang Xiangxi as candidate for Minister of Emergency Management, Yi Gang as candidate for Governor of the People's Bank of China, Hou Kai as candidate for Auditor General of the National Audit Office. We will bring you more updates from the Great Hall of the People. And for now, let's go live to CGTN reporter Feng Yilei at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Yilei, talk to us about what we can expect from today's meeting, the fifth plenary meeting.
Well, thank you, Zhong Shi. Actually, the voting, as you said, is going on at the Great Hall of the People. And I should say at this moment, what we can expect for the new leadership is somewhat implied in the plans and goals set by the NPC Standing Committee and the central government in their reports earlier. And as you said, first, the lawmakers will vote on approval of officials on the special committees of the country's top legislature. And these departments assist in the NPC and its Standing Committee in legislation and supervision, and they play an important role in researching, deliberating, and drawing up bills and proposals in their related areas. And we realize actually the NPC has pledged to accelerate enaction of laws in some enaction of new laws in some certain areas, including, for example, science and technology, environmental protection, and people's well-being. So there's really a lot to look forward to. And also today we will get a clearer idea of the staff composition of the central government, new leadership after appointment of more state council positions. And it's been deemed essential this year to prioritize economic stability while pursuing progress. And the authorities say they will focus on, for example, expanding domestic demand, better attracting and utilizing foreign investment, and advancing rural revitalization, and for example, modernizing industrial systems. So I think in this case, we will. It's just about the hard work falling on the shoulders of a new lineup of officials. And I would like to add that the 14th NPC has already approved an institutional reshuffle, which experts say will help make the cabinet more efficient and more target-oriented. But right now, I think we can get a sense of some of the attempts already underway from both comments made at the so-called ministers' corridors earlier, and some of the interviews my colleagues have done with ministers and other state leaders. And this afternoon, deputies will consider the work report of the government, the annual plan, annual budget, as well as reports of the NPC Standing Committee and the Supreme People's Court, the Supreme People's Procuratorate, that will come before they finally vote on the draft resolutions at the meeting on Monday. Back to you in the studio.
All right, appreciate that update from you, Feng Yilei, right outside the Great Hall of the People, the venue of the 14th National People's Congress. Thank you. Now let's go back to our studio guests, Professor Xia Lu and Mr. Einar Tangen. Gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to our program today. We just reported on the lineup of candidates for key positions, including vice premiers and ministers. Professor Xia, let me start with you. What do you make of the lineup we just reported on the program?
Yes, like you just mentioned, these are the kind of candidates for the ministers and a member of the state council, state councilors, and this kind of officials, senior officials, they represent the, we can say, the capable of people who can, make the blueprint into reality. If we talk about the CPC 20th National Congress last year, that Congress made a blueprint for the rest of, for the future of China, not only for 5 years but also for the 15 years. And this group of people, this line of kind of senior officials, they are kind of accountable, or they are responsible to make this blueprint into reality. That's what we can expect from these senior officials. Right.
Does it reflect on the principles and spirits embodied by the 20th CPC Congress? Is that what your take as well, Einar?
Yeah, I mean, you heard them say that this is about the plan, the budget, and this is the team. It can't actually be more simple. There's no political back and forth or anything like that, or I'll exchange, if you help me, I'll help you with your things.
Right.
This is just simply, this is what you're supposed, this is the plan, here's the money that you have, now you need to get it done. And they're all related. They're not going to say, well, we want you to get, do more with less or things like that. We say, we've established the things. You've been all of these people have been part of the planning process. So, what happens from here out, this is the fifth plenary. So this is, the final plenary session. This is kind of look back at what has happened and establish what needs to go forward. But these people are going to be accountable next year. They're going to have to be a work report, and they're going to be measured against the budget, the plan, and whether they were able to accomplish. So yeah, it's people outside of China, they concentrate a lot on who's involved. But this is a continuity, as you said. This is the plan for the next 50 years. Yeah. The only thing we know for certain is none of us are going to be around in 50 years, okay? And none of these people will. So they're preparing the path, and I think that's really important.
They will be held responsible and accountable in executing the grand plan that has been set in place here. Professor Xia, let me get your evaluation of the session since it began on March 5th this year. What has it achieved, and what role will it play if we look a little bit ahead down the road?
Yes, it's been a kind of tight schedule because I also follow this session ever since its beginning, the March the 5th, and actually I think these 2,977 deputies they were very busy because they are going to, they were talking about or they were discussing the work report of the cabinet, the government. They were reviewing the report of the Supreme Court and even the work report of the Procuratorate, and also they were also reviewing some kind of a laws draft, and they were going to preparing for the next year's budget. So they were very busy, and sometimes I would like to say that in my opinion this kind of the meeting of the session should be kind of prolonged for more, let's say 5 more days or 6 more days. But actually they got their job done, and they were very diligent people because although they were kind of the let's say not this kind of full-time, they were part-time kind of a lawmaker, legislator. They still get their job done very kind of fruitfully and diligently. So what we can expect after this session is that they already set the plan, they already set the strategic plan. The next job or the rest for us is to get all this kind of blueprint into reality, and that is what we can expect from the senior officials. And one more thing I would like to add is that some of these senior officials, ministers, candidates, they come from the front line, and they were the managers of the state-owned enterprises, and they were some of the local, the leaders, local governors, and even this kind of local, the party chief. So they know the reality of a certain area. They know the certain kind of difficulties, obstacles in certain industries. That is why they can bring the particular interest into the whole overall plan. Well, that's what we can expect in the future.
The wheels of history will get rolling again. Einar, I know you will want to weigh in on this as well. Let me come back to you a little bit later on. Thank you so much. Chinese modernization is socialist modernization pursued under the leadership of the Communist Party of China. It contains elements that are common to the modernization process of all countries, but it is more characterized by features that are unique to the Chinese context. It is the modernization of a huge population, as China is working to achieve modernization for more than 1.4 billion people. And achieving common prosperity is a defining feature of socialism with Chinese characteristics. For socialist modernization, material abundance and cultural, ethical enrichment are fundamental goals. China is committed to sustainable development and dedicated to peace, development, cooperation, and mutual benefits while pursuing modernization. China adopts a 2-step strategic plan to build a great modern socialist country in all respects. The first is from 2020 through 2035, then from 2035 through the middle of this century. In China, one of the most difficult areas when it comes to modernizing has been in rural areas. A key goal continues to be ensuring a stable food supply. CGTN's Omar Khan takes a look at how technology and science in Hunan province are enabling farms to achieve greater output and efficiency.
From farmland to a crop breeding lab, for Xiangyan Seed Industry, a high-tech agriculture company, science and new technology are driving and transforming traditional farming practices. These sprouts will eventually turn into peppers, corn, eggplants, and other vegetables. And the focus on food security is going beyond these labs, spreading through much of Hunan province's fertile land.
Changsha is building 4 bases for grain production, with one focus on advanced technology. It also includes high quality and high yield output. The aim is to improve the level of food production, while also gradually introducing modern agricultural technologies to farmers. Over time, it's transformed from small to large scale.
Through a mix of integrated technologies, fertilizers, and pesticides, these rice fields in Changsha County have seen a near 39% year-on-year increase in yields. Nationwide, grain output hit a new high in 2022, once again topping 600 million tons. But much of that comes down to the work and advances being made across local farmlands. China has 128 million hectares of arable land, with nearly half of that area developed as high-quality farmland for grain and other agricultural products. And with 20% of the world's population relying on farms like this for a stable food supply, it's no wonder key technology and innovation are playing an increasingly significant role. Every year, 50 million yuan is invested into the seed industry here in Changsha County. These funds go directly to agricultural R&D projects, accelerating the cultivation of crops and livestock. It's perhaps no longer about the plows and rakes, but about innovative techniques that make the country's agriculture sector competitive both domestically and globally.
Modern science and technology such as intelligent breeding are crucial. We can save on labor and improve efficiency. If we use robots to raise livestock, we reduce contact with humans, therefore reducing the occurrence of diseases. Biotechnology is also important. Using fermented microorganisms as feed additives can improve the quality of agricultural products.
China has laid out a blueprint for securing its bottom line to ensure national food security and avoid large-scale reemergence of poverty. Farmlands like the ones here in Changsha County are only a small fragment of the efforts being made across the country. But every advance and every step forward they make will ultimately play a pivotal role in China's process of modernization. Omar Khan, CGTN, in Changsha County, Hunan Province.
Let me pick up my conversation with my studio guests here, Professor Xia and Mr. Einar Tangen. Let's pick up where we left off just now. Let me also get your take, Einar, on your evaluation of the NPC's work this year. How will this session, the first session of the 14th NPC, be reflected on and remembered later?
Well, it's really about the dynamics of change. I mean, so many things. China's facing headwinds internally, externally, in terms of the economy, internally and externally because of pressure from outside. So, what you see in these few days, and I agree with you, it should be longer, but you're seeing the tip of an iceberg, all right? And by that, I mean, there has been so much work that has gone into creating these plans, budgets, and who was going to be on the team that implements them. And it's really hard for people outside to understand just how much that is. I mean, everything has to be harmonized. There are a lot of group discussions, I'm sure you are familiar with that, and they go for long periods of time until they reach consensus. And then you have to have consensus at all of these different levels. So when you get to this point, this legislation isn't somebody's idea that they had last night and had somebody write it up. This is a very, very, very step-by-step process. And the challenge here for the government is to convey, all right, exactly how much work has gone into this, who's been involved, what their concerns are, in essence to reflect the concerns of the people. I mean, obviously with inflation raging in Europe and America, it hit an 8 in Great Britain, over 10%. China was able to maintain less than 2%. All right, why? Because it does pay attention to the rural issues, and it's also related to poverty. I mean, the revitalization effort is to make sure that you have a stable society. What do you need? You need food, and you need people, an inclusive society. So these are the types of things that they're emphasizing here when they give these kinds of reports, is that they want people to understand how much they've done and where they're going.
Agriculture is a big part and is a priority as China moves forward in its aspirations to achieve the Chinese path to modernization. I do want to get into that a little bit later on, but for now I want to get your take, gentlemen, on the topic of sci-tech innovation, because China wants high-level development, and a big component of that is how China does with its sci-tech innovation. What is the government role here in encouraging and in facilitating innovation?
Right. Yeah. This is actually touches the history of the development of science and technology. So previously, when we review the human kind of society's achievement in history, in science and technology, most of the kind of achievement just achieved by the individual, personal kind of effort. You know, someone just found a new element, right? Someone just found a new kind of a way, or someone just got a new formula, and then it's inducive to the creation of a nuclear bomb. But nowadays, the government or the state role in the initiation or the orientation of the science technology is more practice-oriented, because in China, China is now in urgent need of a sci-tech kind of input in the kind of the weak industry, for example, in the agriculture, for example, in the infrastructure. So science and technology in China becomes more of a tool or more of a kind of a driving force behind the economic growth. So that is why in this kind of session, one of the most important issues is the restructuring of the institution, and that's the restructuring of the Ministry of Science and Technology. So we can expect that the state or the role of the state will become more and more stronger in the future in promotion target-oriented science and technology. Right.
You still need that individual input, that individual ambitions and contribution, if you will, when you want to propel this sector. But obviously the state and the government has a role to play in allocating resources, in getting the money ready, getting the right talent for this to develop. Einar?
Well, I think it's more than that. I mean, I've been involved in economic development across different countries. And as you said, you cannot produce a person who's going to have the ideas.
Right.
All right. You produce people. But you can create the environment that allows innovation to spring forward. And by that I mean, we know that you need finance, you need intellectual property protections, you need education. So those areas like Silicon Valley happened. Why? Because it was at the nexus of this education. There were good people there. Now they needed to get their ideas to market, and so there had to be finance, all right, and they had to be able to earn something from it, and that was the IP protection. So governments can arrange things in a way that is conducive to taking advantage of people who do have ideas. I mean, for example, the gentleman that was on the delegates,
the corridor
question,
corridor.
who was talking about, well, my father worked at Tianjin Port, and I worked here, but I looked at this thing and I said, oh, we can make improvements. And he's been recognized nationally for contributing, and that's what I mean. You have to produce those conditions that allow excellent people to succeed and contribute.
When you talk about fostering the right environment, we talk about fostering the talent and everything that is conducive to the development of sci-tech. It's a very long-term plan. You're not going to expect things to turn around in just 2-3 years. This is a very long-term strategic plan. So Einar, when you hear the restructuring of the Ministry of Science and Technology, how does that fit into the overall plan of we want to facilitate this, we want to turn this around for China?
Look, societies are dynamic. They change, technology changes, and you have to react to it. And quite frankly, China's challenges have changed. I mean, in essence, cutting China off from key technologies in order to contain it by other countries has forced China to evaluate and said, look, we're going to have to be more self-reliant in the future.
Absolutely.
We cannot depend on somebody who doesn't like us or thinks that we need to be somewhere down in the lower echelons of the political, economic, social order. So, China is doing that. So when you encounter those headwinds, you have to react. And that means that you have to adjust everything, not your plan, your budget, and your strategies. So China is reacting to the harsh realities that are being put on it, not saying, oh, we want to keep everybody out. They're just simply saying we have no choice.
Professor Xia, help us understand what a restructured Ministry of Science and Technology will be in a better position to do. What can you expect from this change, this restructuring?
Okay, actually we have two, let's say, points to understand the restructuring of the Ministry of Science and Technology. The first is that it shows the centralizing and the unifying leadership of China, not only in the CPC, but also the national strategy making or national strategy implementing. It's all about the unifying and the centralizing kind of leadership, because it needs to make full use of the resources, make full use of the existing talent, and make full use of the existing resources to boost China's kind of science technology. The second point is still about the self-reliance we just mentioned. And self-reliance, let me use a metaphor. Sometimes I can, when I was kind of weak, I seek help from my neighbor. For example, you can assist me or help me, get me through this kind of hard kind of period. But this is only temporary kind of technology or temporary tactics. If I want to live longer, if I want to live for myself, I cannot just rely on my neighbor forever for everything. So I just have to find a way out on myself. So that's a similar kind of metaphor or logic for a country. One country, one strong country with a huge kind of a population and a long history of civilization need to be relied on itself in pursuing its own way to modernization, finding its own path to the prosperity. So that's the key meaning of the self-reliance.
But there's another cross current going there, because right now China is being shut off by the developed countries. But at the same time, with the Middle East and other countries, ASEAN, it's saying we need to share the digital technology, because in the future, those who have the means to develop digital technology are going to dominate the world. They're going to have the ability to do that. And if you're going to have a sustainable world, you cannot have a haves and have-nots of the future, and the future is unfortunately the digital technology. So China, by saying that we want to share with other countries, is sending a strong message. If you don't want to share with us, we have to be self-reliant, but at the same time we believe in a sustainable world where in fact there is a more equitable distribution and understanding and sharing of the technology that can move the world to faster and better forward.
It's also about timing. Does China have the window of opportunity, the window of time that other countries, developed countries, richer nations will allow China as it pursues its path of self-reliance when it comes to technology? Your take on this, will China be under even more pressure as it's made itself clear, I want to be more independent when it comes to this?
Right, yes. This is a kind of one of the arguments made by Professor Gershon from Harvard University at the Department of Economic History. His argument was that not each and every country can do the catch-up similar to the already developed country. So the already first level of developed country, they got their advantage of timing. They got their advantage of less competitor. They got their advantage of more favorable circumstances. For example, not that tight control of the property rights regulation. But for catch-up countries like China, for catch-up country like developing country like China, they got even fierce competition. They got even not that favorable circumstances, and they got even the high the high standard of the responsibility of a big country like the carbon dioxide emission, this kind of responsibility. So China is now facing a difficult, let's say, situation in terms of economic growth and other kind of development. That is why the more urgent it need, the more, let's say, necessary it focuses on self-reliance, because timing is not that favorable for China and even for the latecomers developing countries. So yeah.
And just back to the neighbor metaphor, when you're the new kid on the block, it's okay. Well, everyone, extends a helping hand. But then when you're a big guy on the street, probably people's perceptions about your role in the neighborhood change, and they're not as willing in facilitating your growth. Let's put it that way. All right, gentlemen, I'll be back with you in a few moments. Thank you. You're watching our special coverage on China's ongoing annual political season. We'll be right back after this.
China embarks on a new journey,
building a modern socialist country.
With top stories from Beijing
and voices from all across the country
on economic trends and vitality,
and visions on humanity and development.
The 2023 two sessions, only on CGTN.
There's another important topic on our agenda today, the topic of agriculture. Let's talk about this with our studio guests here. Professor Xia, the Minister of Agriculture, Rural Affairs, is included in the State Council reforms. What type of changes can we anticipate?
The Ministry of Agriculture bears another name of the revitalization, a rural revitalization administration. Previously, before 2020, there was a kind of office like the Office of Poverty Alleviation, right? After 2020, this office became the Office or Administration of Rural Revitalization. And now, in this session, the institution reform just integrated that Office of Rural Revitalization into the Ministry of Agriculture and the Rural Affairs. That means this ministry will focus more on the rural revitalization in terms of not only economic growth but also social structure, social development, and even some kind of taking care of the aging people, taking care of the infrastructure, that kind of thing. So it is an expansion of the obligation of this ministry. Yeah.
You can see from the name change that China is serious about its rural revitalization plan.
Right.
It doesn't end with just having lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. That is extreme poverty. People want a better life, richer life, and they deserve a more affluent life.
Right.
So what does rural revitalization entail at this point, Einar?
Well, it really is, as you pointed out. I mean, this is to make sure that people don't slide back into poverty. Now, I mean, in a nation like the United States, 10.1% of the people are actually in poverty. And there's really no effort right now. I don't see anything to do that. In fact, most of them are under attack, and it's likely that the number will grow. In China, that isn't acceptable. It's a socialist nation. They say, look, we're not going to be judged by how we treat the most powerful and wealthy. We'll be judged by how we treat those who are not powerful and wealthy. So that is the essence of this idea that, look, every part of society has to rise. It cannot be just a few. So at this juncture, it's continuity.
Yeah.
It's making sure if you start measuring this against the long-term goals, we talked about, this is not only this 5-year plan, but 50 years hence. What kind of society do you want? Do you want one where the haves and have-not are accentuated? Or do you want one where you have a society where there's opportunity, incentive to do well, but also those on the bottom are not being ignored?
When you look at China's current rural revitalization plan with China's urbanization process, how does that process fit into the plan? Are we still encouraging farmers to relocate to the cities in search of a better life, in search of higher paid jobs? How does that work for the farmers?
Yes, on the one hand, actually, the rural kind of the villagers they are encouraged to go to the urban area because they want their better life and they want to live in urban area. They want also enjoy the urban kind of infrastructure. For example, they want to go to a library, they want to go to good cinemas, and they want to go to kind of a good, even the parks. So these kind of people, if they want to live in urban area, they are still encouraged and they can live. And the government will facilitate more favorable, let's say, policies to help them to live in urban area. On the other hand, if some kind of people still want to live in the countryside, the village, and still want to work in the agriculture, the government also will facilitate the policies and even some kind of stimulating policies for them to help them with their agriculture industry, help them get more, let's say, support, the financial support, policy support, environmental support, less regulation, less regulatory, this kind of thing. So that's why in China, the government will kind of encourage people to pursue their own life in the future, not like before. You just have to live here. You just have to stick to the land, and you cannot live without any allowance. No, not like that. So each and every people can have or pursue their own lifestyle. That's the essence of human development. Right.
I mean, it all comes down to having choices and options, so you're not just stuck in a place.
Right.
Because of a lack of options. And to do that, you need a safety net so people don't fall through, the
cracks.
The cracks here.
Cracks, yeah.
Yes, and so that they have choices, they have options, they can have better aspirations. In order to build that safety net, what needs to be done for the people that choose to relocate to urban areas?
Well, in terms of that, I mean, the hukou reform is one of them. The ability to receive the benefits of the socialist society in the place where you live is very important. But it's a very, very tricky thing. People just say, oh, just let people live where they want. Okay. Well, if you had
they pretty much can live where they want.
Well,
with small and mid-sized cities, it's the giant first-tier cities.
Yes, exactly.
That's the issue.
But what you're concerned about is cities work on infrastructure. So if I have a city and it's designed for 15 million people, if I have 30 million people there, you're going to have real problems. It impacts the quality of life that people are moving there for. And you start, in many countries they have these huge poor areas outside these major cities because people don't know what to do. China has a unique situation. They have over 30% of the people in the rural areas. If you start looking at the United States, we have less than 2% of our population is related to agriculture in these rural areas, and that has allowed us to be very, very efficient. We have larger farms, etc. China's taking a much more cautious approach to that. They're not saying you have to move away or we're going to make it impossible to make a living. But if you look at the modern Chinese farmer today, all right, a lot of them have technical degrees. All right, they don't farm the way their grandfather farmed with a hoe and things. They have tractors. They're using drones. I mean, people see drones on the television. They were showing them, applying fertilizers and seeds and things like that. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. China has the largest adoption of technology in the farm field. Why? Because it is far more efficient. If you use drones, you can cut down the amount of pesticides, which means less pesticides entering the water. You can use less fertilizer, which also is an issue in terms of the environment. You can use less labor. You can improve the productivity and the output. So there are big changes coming, and the type of person who's involved in farming is going to be very different. And China is trying to help that process along, both for the quality of life of those who want to be farmers, but also for the nation as a whole.
Yeah, we talked about technological advancements just now, but it's not just about semiconductors and chips. It's also about agricultural equipment that helps with the efficiency and productivity in rural areas. How will modern day technology help transform China's agriculture? Obviously, we're talking about more efficiency, more productivity, so fewer people are needed to work in the countryside so they can have more options, whether it's about relocating to cities or building a livelihood out of online commerce, that sort of thing. Your take on this, Professor?
Well, I happen to have some kind of little information about this Ministry of Agriculture because one of my students, after he graduated from the graduate school, and he joined the China Academy of Agricultural Science, and that's one of the agencies affiliated to the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs. And basically, his job is to serve to make the plan, make the research plan, and to allocate the resources, distributed from the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of the Science Technology into some kind of a science, agriculture science. For example, study of the bee, study of the honey, study of the tea, a study of some kind of better seeds in southern China. But he always talked to me that we are going to make the plan, but some of the people who is responsible of giving our money, they don't know the direction. But I would like to say that this kind of restructure of the Ministry of Agriculture and Resources let the professional people do the professional job. So because this Ministry of Agriculture, let's say officials or scientists or agriculture experts, they know in which direction China is going to pay more attention, in which direction the resource should go as a priority. So this kind of restructure, I would like to say, will speed up the improvement of China's agriculture development and this rural revitalization in the end.
Obviously, you need that link between people who have the know-how and then people who work in the fields on what is needed here, and then people who handle the money can draw up plans about where the money goes
well,
to.
And you're hit on a very important point. We always talk about the digital economy in terms of manufacturing, logistics, all these things, but the digital economy is arriving in agriculture because you have GPS satellites, you have sensors in the ground telling you how much water to put in so you're not excessively watering, how much fertilizer, how much pesticide, when the crop is ready to go. They now have machines that literally can mechanically weed, which even gets rid of more pesticides. But connecting that real time to markets so that instead of having, pork prices go, like this, egg prices like this, if you can get rid of that, all right, what happens is people don't invest money that they lose. All right, you have a very, very steady pricing, you have steady supplies, and you get rid of, basically lost capital. So this would really help the farmers. Imagine that when I decide, what am I going to plant this year? Well, here's what your land is capable of. All right, then you can go onto a site and say, if I plant soybean today, what can be my expected, price at the time of market? And it can actually tell that, and then you can press a button and say, well, okay, I want to forward sell half of my product so that I can protect myself from having a situation where I lose money. I mean, this would be a huge game changer, and this is what digital economy
I'm sorry to interrupt, Einar. Let's go back to the Great Hall of the People. We're getting some activity there at the venue of the NPC. The 5th plenary meeting of the first session of the 14th National People's Congress is underway. Take a listen.
丁薛祥、何立峰、张国清
NPC deputies have approved Premier Li Qiang's nominations of Ding Xuexiang, He Lifeng, Zhang Guoqing, and Liu Guozhong as vice premiers. The meeting has also approved Li Shangfu, Wang Xiaohong, Wu Zhenglong, Shen Yiqing, and Qin Gang as state councilors.
吴仲龙为国务院秘书长。
Wu Zhenglong has been approved as Secretary General of the State Council.
外交部长。
Qin Gang has been approved as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Li Shangfu has been approved as Minister of National Defense.
委员会主任。
Zheng Shanjie has been approved as head of the National Development and Reform Commission. Huai Jingpeng has been approved as Minister of Education. Wang Zhigang has been approved as Minister of Science and Technology. Jing Zhuanglong has been approved as Minister of Industry and Information Technology. Han Yue has been approved as head of State Ethnic Affairs Commission. Wang Xiaohong has been approved as Minister of Public Security. Chen Yixing has been approved as Minister of State Security. Pang Dengjie has been approved as Minister of Civil Affairs. He Rong has been approved as Minister of Justice. Liu Kun has been approved as Minister of Finance. Wang Xiaoping has been approved as Minister of Human Resources and Social Security. Wang Guanghua has been approved as Minister of Natural Resources. Huang Renqiu has been approved as Minister of Ecology and Environment. Ni Hong has been approved as Minister of Housing and Urban Rural Development. Li Xiaopeng has been approved as Minister of Transport. Li Guoying has been approved as Minister of Water Resources. Tang Renjian has been approved as Minister of Agriculture and Rural Affairs. Wang Wenkao has been approved as Minister of Commerce. Hu Heping has been approved as Minister of Culture and Tourism. Ma Xiaowei has been approved as head of the National Health Commission. Pei Jinjia has been approved as Minister of Veterans Affairs. Wang Xiangxi has been approved as Minister of Emergency Management. Yi Gang has been approved as Governor of the People's Bank of China. Hou Kai has been approved as Auditor General of the National Audit Office. And we'll bring you more updates from the Great Hall of the People. Just now you saw a lineup of candidates being approved So there it is, the latest update from the Great Hall of the People. The candidates have now been approved and they will be held accountable and responsible as they carry out their work in accordance with the grand plan, the grand blueprint, as we talked about just now. Of course, the fifth plenary meeting is still ongoing at the Great Hall of the People. We'll wait for more activity and updates from the venue. In the meantime, I do want to talk to you about agriculture, which we were just discussing right now. Obviously, rural revitalization is a big part of China's ongoing plan here. And we talked about allowing people to pursue their choice of development, whether it's about relocating to urban areas or with the help of digital economy, connecting the dots together so that they know where they are. Professor Xia here, what do you think remains to be done by the government in terms of deepening this revitalization plan going forward?
Yes, and actually, on the one hand, it's still the development because development is the priority of the the overall general strategy. All the questions, all the obstacles, all the issues could only be solved by the further or the deep development, and that's the kind of the key words, and that's the strategy. Well, on the other hand, when we focus on the speed of the development, we still also focus on the balance of the social structure, balance of the social kind of life. For example, we know that in the rural areas there are still some of the leftover families, or leftover children, leftover, let's say, aging people, the elders, and they should be taken care of, and they should be, let's say, provided with the facilities and even equipment for even to maintain their normal life. So it is very kind of important, and it is significant to China's further development. And I would like to say that it is a joint effort. It will be a joint effort not only by the Ministry of Agriculture and the Rural Affairs, but also by other ministries. For example, the Ministry of Civil Affairs, the National Commission of the Health and medical, the kind of things. So it is important for China, not only in the economic development, but also the social kind of welfare. Yeah.
I mean, the fact China is stressing the importance of agriculture is also because China wants to emphasize food security. We've had severe disruptions in global food supply chains because of geopolitical conflicts. Do you think China was spared, Einar, of the disruptions there because China is pretty self-sufficient when it comes to food production? But when China talks about food security, what challenges remain for China to tackle when it comes to feeding 1.4 billion people and feeding them well?
Well, it's productivity. You have a certain amount of land. China and the U.S. have approximately the same amount of arable land, but China has almost 4 times as many people. So obviously you have to make better use of the resources that you have, and they continue to do that. They're now experimenting with something very akin to GMO, genetically modified seeds within China that are developed in China. And there's always been a lot of complaints by American agribusiness that said, well, why won't you buy ours? Well, that's a perfect example of food security. Given what the U.S. has done in technology, can you imagine that if Chinese farmers were dependent on American GMO seeds and the Washington said, no, we're not giving you seeds this year, what are you going to do? Food is an essential. I always see the economy in 2 ways. One is the things you need. You need food, water, shelter, basic clothing and things. After that, it's a lot about choice. But choices can be moved around. Whether I go to the movie theater or a sports game or travel, that's my choice. But I don't have a choice when it comes to feeding myself and my family. So China is shoring up the very base of society, what is necessary to support it so that they can have this ability to allow people to make choices.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. And you're now watching our special coverage of China's political season, the 2 sessions. The 14th National People's Congress is now holding the 5th plenary meeting of its first session. NPC deputies have just approved the candidates for the vice premiers, state councilors, ministers, heads of commissions, governor of the central bank, auditor general, and secretary general of the state council. Next, they're going to decide on candidates for leaders and members of 8 special committees of the NPC. We'll bring you all of that information when it becomes available. Do stay with us right here on CGTN.
作为一名来自基层的全国人大代 I try to serve the public by doing specific things for them. I want them to feel that the party is truly committed to serving the people heart and soul. I think this shows that the spirit of the 20th Communist Party of China National Congress is bearing fruit at the grassroots level.
After doing research for over 30 years, I have come to realize two things. First, we cannot buy core technologies from anywhere. We are on our own to achieve technological breakthroughs and build up our national strength. Second, Chinese people are one of the most capable and aspiring. We can break any stranglehold aimed at containing China's development.
In 2013, when we landed the Chang'e 3 probe successfully on the moon, we thought the moon is near and Mars is far away. When the Tianwen-1 probe touched down on Mars in 2021, we brought Mars closer to us, though we're still far from our dreams. In the future, we'll continue to advance into the universe and make greater contributions to build China into a powerhouse of space technologies.
Welcome back. China is the world's largest consumer of energy, but the way forward is a focus on maintaining growth while protecting the environment. How is China modernizing while prioritizing green development? Our Xu Xinchen reports from one of the world's largest hydropower stations located in southwest China.
Electricity fuels industrialization, yet humans are facing an unprecedented energy crisis. Ensuring energy generation is green and sustainable has become crucial as countries modernize. In China, water is becoming one of the answers to the question of clean and abundant energy. Thanks to Mother Nature, water plus gravity helps generate electricity with zero carbon emission.
This is the Baihetan hydropower station, which became fully operational at the end of 2022. The generating capacity of this dam is only second to the Three Gorges Dam in the world, another engineering marvel built by China on its journey towards sustainability.
I had to pay a visit inside.
Now we're seeing the heart of the hydropower station, which is our 1,000,000-kilowatt power generating unit. This unit is a big beast, 50 meters tall with a weight over 8,000 tons. That is heavier than the Eiffel Tower. But despite its huge size, in fact, it is the core and the most precise equipment in our entire power station, and even the most sophisticated equipment made for the hydropower industry. The coaxiality deviation of the main shaft of the water turbine below us and the generator above is less than 0.015 millimeters, which is thinner than a string of hair.
This is far more precise compared to the global standardized tolerance of 0.3 millimeters. Water moves the turbine linking the generator, transforming the movement into electricity.
The power generating unit in Baihetan, developed and engineered in China, has the world's largest capacity per unit. And there are 16 of these units that can generate enough power over the course of a year for 75 million people.
Thanks to China's ultra-high voltage grid, the clean electricity from Baihetan can reach Shanghai over 2,000 kilometers away, fast and easy.
The ultra-high voltage grid allows for electricity to be transported across great distances. Green development also reflects how our Chinese path to modernization differs from Western modernizations. One of the most important aspects is how China emphasizes harmonious development between man and nature while pursuing modernization.
The transition to green energy fuels China's path to modernity. The country believes a march into modernity needs harmonious development between man and nature. China's leadership has shown its determination to protect the environment while maintaining fast growth. And the country is working to meet its goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2060. Progress is being made. Data suggests that China contributed 40% of global carbon emission reduction in 2022. Xu Xinchen, CGTN, Sichuan Province.
I'm now joined in the studio by Professor Xia Lu and Mr. Einar Tangen. Gentlemen, let's talk about the approved positions, including obviously vice premiers and ministers. Let's go to your department first, Professor Xia, the Minister of Education, Huai Jinpeng here. What do we know about his background, and how do you expect him to carry out new reforms, new changes in the education sector?
Right. Actually, yes. We know, as university teachers, we know Mr. Huai Jinpeng a lot because before he became the Minister of Education, actually he was the Chancellor of Beijing. Beijing University of Aerospace and Aeroscience, and he actually is an engineer in this area. So we can say that this nomination, the improvement of this new line of senior official, represent a signal that let expert, come out to the first, and it is expert-oriented governance, and it's kind of a
Technocrats?
Yes.
Well, these are people who are really involved. They're experts. They're scientists. They're engineers. They're people who, as you pointed out, in the education.
Right.
Exactly. And and this is what people outside in the U.S., Europe, they're always expecting a politician, with some, I don't know, whatever background. Look at Donald Trump. Here, it's really about people who understand what they're doing and have been involved, and they have experience both in government and as experts.
Yes, because he knows education, and he was. And
sure.
Yes, he is. Still a university teacher, but I don't know whether he's still taking, giving lectures. But he definitely giving lectures, and he knows what students need. He knows that Chinese education's difficulty, and he knows Chinese education's, let's say, weakness, and some kind of the shorthand of Chinese education. So he knows how to allocate the resources, and also how to make Chinese education to assist the further development, especially in science and technology. Right.
And also some of the vice premiers announced just now. I know Liu Jingguo and Zhang Guoqing, you are also familiar with their backgrounds. How do they expect them to carry out their work?
And especially Vice Premier He Lifeng, because all these kind of vice premiers, they were either ministers of the last term of government, or the local governors, or the local kind of the provincial leaders in different areas. Some of them were leading the northeastern provinces. Some of them were leading the coastal provinces in eastern. So they know this variation of the regional development, and they know what kind of resources they have, what kind of advantage this region have, but what kind of disadvantage that areas they don't have. So they can better balance, and they can better, let's say, make the allocation among all these areas. So make it all like the universal, like overall development, rather than someone take the particular interest, someone get the favorable interest condition while the other one didn't get. So it is all for China's overall development to the high quality development, right?
Yeah, when you work at the state council level as vice premiers, obviously you're going to have to balance the needs and the wants of different regions. That's your job. You're going to have to coordinate a great deal.
And you need the experience to do that. Unlike in Washington, people, or in these huge, the EU, you have people who live inside a bubble, right? They might make inspection tours, but they don't actually live it. They're not responsible for there. They make, quote, national policy or group policy. That's not the case in China. You cannot rise to these levels unless you have beginning from grassroots things, or something very similar to it, so that you've actually been involved.
Gentlemen, let's move on to the topic of green development. It's obviously a component of China's high-level development. You want high level, you want high quality, you want green, but there are worries that going green might have to take a backseat position, because China's economy is just beginning to rebound, and you're having a lot of goals when it comes to economic growth targets. Will that have to sacrifice your green initiatives, your green objectives, Professor?
Well, for example, let's say if we want to pursue some kind of the longer period kind of target, we must recognize there would be some kind of a cost. There would be some kind of a temporary cost, but it's for the longer good, a better good. So the considering of the green, or the taking into account of the green development, just to represent or just to show Chinese philosophy about the balance, not only considering present but also considering the future. So I think it would be better not only for China but also for the rest of the world. Right?
Well, I was heartened, but they're still referring to the 2060 goal, the 2030 goal. They are making adjustments as necessary, but so is everybody else in the world. I mean, the amount of coal-fired plants in Europe has just expanded because of the situation with natural gas. Everybody is doing the best they can, but China is, because of the continuity of the system, because they have 5 and 50-year plans, they say, okay, we're going to do this for a while, but now we're going to have to redouble. There's going to be an allocation of resources to make sure that we do hit these goals. You're really not hearing that from many other places in the world. They're just talking about, well, we're just doing what is necessary, but you're not really, and there's a lot more greenwashing going on in the United States. And I noticed from a policy point of view, there's been criticism within China that says we're not following that path. We're not going to have fake green so that companies can get lower cost financing. If it's going to be green, it has to actually be green. And they're coming up with their own measurements of that for things happening in China.
Is China taking on added challenges with the status of its economic development here when it wants to stick with its green goals, the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality goals here?
Yes, that's also one of China's responsibility as a big country or the big power, or let's say responsible country in this world, because Chinese leaders is promoting, building, let's say, the community of a shared future for the mankind. Actually, we are all members of this community. So, like I just mentioned, the Chinese people, Chinese people is favoring, let's say, the balancing thought or balancing thinking, not only considering present time but also considering the future. Right. On the other hand, Chinese people not only consider themselves, but also consider, the member of this community, other people. So taking other people into account into this kind of thing, it just represents China's, Chinese leaders' broad thinking and Chinese leaders' greater global perspective, taking the responsibility. Actually, this responsibility should be taken by some developed country rather than developing countries like China. But China is now still taking this responsibility. That shows China's, responsibility and the strength and a greater perspective.
Leading by example is the most important.
Yeah.
If countries around the world would simply practice what they preached and lead by example, we wouldn't be in the situation we are in.
We would be further down the road with those climate goals and commitments, essentially. One of the political advisors at the Members' Corridor yesterday talked about China sharing its experiences, its what he called China's wisdom when it comes to green development. Is China in a position to share wisdom with the world? I mean, we are leading in some of the, energy. We're leading in wind, in hydropower, in photovoltaic, and nuclear. But is China really in a position to share that with the rest of the world now?
Well, China is kind of in some kind of position or in some kind of field is leading, let's say, a country in terms of the research and the transformation of the research and the scientific study into the reality. But in other places, in other kind of field, China is still need to learning from other countries. But now China is setting an example of sharing what you have already know to those countries who are urgent of this kind of thing. Well, this example is not for the developing country, but this example is for those developed countries. It goes like, I don't have all the people, I don't have all the resources, but what I can have, I can share to the rest of the society what you can do. So that's the example thing. And this signal is not only for the developing country, but also for the developed country.
Yes.
Yeah. And drip irrigation is a thing. So drip irrigation was brought in from Israel, but now China is sharing this, especially in African, sub-Saharan areas, things like that, where it's desperately needed to fight the erosion, desertification, provide food for these areas. But there's so many other things. Like earlier today, you had the expert from the Forestry Division talking about how to improve soils by rotating crops so that you can actually grow more. It's not always about just the high tech. If you want a greener future, there are so many different ways of doing it. Sharing that information doesn't cost anything. It just improves everything. And I think that's what really counts, is your willingness to share that, not for profit, but for the good of everybody. There's no downside for China to share how to improve your soil.
It's not a zero-sum game here when it comes to sharing what you know about agricultural technology. Gentlemen, hold that thought. I'll be back with you in just a few moments' time. And in the meantime, we want to update you with this oath-taking ceremony.
Fellow deputies, this morning, all of the items on the agenda for the meeting have been completed, and according to the organization method on pledging allegiance to the Constitution by the first presidium of the first session of the 14th NPC, now we enter into the pledging ceremony. Here we are having the pledging ceremony to the Constitution for the first session of the 14th NPC. Please all rise up. Sing the national anthem. Please take your seats. Now let's invite the Vice Premier of the State Council, Ding Xuexiang, He Lifeng, Zhang Guoqing, Liu Guozhong, State Councilors Li Shangfu, Wang Xiaohong, State Councilors and Secretary General Wu Zhenglong, State Councilor Shen Yiqing, and Councilor Qin Gang to pledge allegiance. And Ding Xuexiang will be the lead. Please take your positions. And the pledging. I pledge to be allegiant to the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, safeguard the constitutional authority, perform obligations given by the laws, be loyal to the country and people, be committed and honest when performing duties, accept people's supervision, and work hard for a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful. Fellow deputies, the pledging ceremony has been ended. Now the meeting is adjourned.
An oath-taking ceremony at the Great Hall of the People where newly appointed government officials pledged their allegiance to the Constitution. And let's talk about that with our studio guests here. It's a very powerful visual presentation from those newly appointed officials, high-ranking officials, I should say. But this ceremony, oath-taking ceremony is not just reserved for high-ranking officials starting from 2016. So this is a newer type of formality that officials above the county level should do this when they're newly appointed. What is your take on what this does to the people watching?
I would like to use a metaphor to describe the essence or the function of this oath taking, but I'm not sure whether it is appropriate. It's like oath taking in a wedding. This is the connection of not only two people, but also of the two families, but also of two group of people. Like this oath taking of the senior official is also represent a connection. One of these kind of message is the connection between the senior official and the people and the deputies who vote or approve their kind of position. So the first one is the connection between the official and the people. That's the spirit of the Chinese kind of politics. And the second is during this ceremony, during these rituals, those kind of senior official, not necessarily senior official, but also those kind of rank and file official, they have the recognition of their duty. So this kind of ritual ceremony just to remind them that they still have this opportunity. Not just like, okay, I take this position, I can enjoy some kind of privilege. No, you have some duty, and if you do not fulfill this duty, maybe next term you wouldn't be here. So this is first the connection. The second is a recognition of the duty. I think that's more important, right?
It's a message to the people. It's a reminder for the officials themselves of the hefty burdens that are now trusted upon them.
Well, what's interesting to me is perhaps a subtle difference. You notice in their pledge, it was to the people. Yes, upholding the laws and the procedures and everything like that. But if you were going to the United States, it's to the Constitution. It's not to the people. It's to a document that it's very, very old. And the idea is that upholds the republic. Well, in China, it's the people who come first. Everything else is subject to that. In the U.S., everyone talks about their rights. They say it's the Constitution is the bedrock of everything. So it's a different perspective. I'm not saying one is right and the other one is wrong. I'm just saying that realize that sometimes what you see is based on what you're used to, right? Your own culture. So don't knock something just simply because it's different. There are many paths to prosperity. China has proven that. And you just kind of have to let it go. The U.S. has to get away from this idea that there's only one solution in the world. It just isn't possible. We still have kingdoms and we still have republics and different flavors of democracy. China has its own version where it believes it is representing the people as was taken by this oath. So if it's working, let it work. 45 years of success. You have to at some point say, well, yeah, maybe they have something.
Yeah. Acknowledging the diversity in politics and people. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. And you're watching our special coverage of today's events at the National People's Congress in Beijing. Lawmakers have endorsed the nominations for China's vice premiers, state councilors, ministers, heads of commissions, governor of the central bank, auditor general, and secretary general of the state council. Next, we'll have the Ministers' Corridor at the Great Hall of the People, where ministers and government department heads are meeting the press and taking questions. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Construction machinery is an industry for the benefit of mankind. Its core competitiveness is key technological innovations. In the past 5 years, we have developed the world's largest tower crane, hydraulic excavator, and a series of domestic-made equipment. Innovation is important for the country's self-reliance and self-improvement in science and technology.
Over the past 10 years, we launched the Liaoning, carried fighter jets on board, and embarked on long-distance deployment. The Liaoning is painting the magnificent trajectory of a great nation. Where our national interest is where our ship sails.
Guided by General Secretary Xi Jinping, we have shifted from relying on the land to nourishing it, and we have changed our development plan. We believe clear waters and lush mountains are valuable assets. It will guide rural vitalization and bring greater glory.
The concept of ecological civilization is now deeply rooted in people's hearts, and protecting the environment has become a national consensus. We will achieve our goal. The wild pandas will live a better life on our land.
Welcome back. CGTN reporter Huang Yue joins me now from the Great Hall of the People, where top government officials will take questions from the media at the Minister's Corridor. Huang Yue, good morning to you. What topics are likely to come up when the ministers get ready to address the press and media?
Yes, good morning, Zhongshi. We are now on standby for the upcoming Minister's Corridor, which will take place soon at this press room of the Great Hall of the People. And earlier, we've learned from the host that today 3 ministers will take questions from journalists, and they're from the Ministry of Natural Resources, the General Administration of Sports, and the National Bureau of Statistics. You know, this is the 3rd Minister's Corridor during this year's 2 sessions, and previously 6 ministers had already received interviews here in this room, and they were from the Ministry of Industry and Information, Ecology and Environment, Ecology and Environment, and Science and Technology, and so on. And from their responses, we've learned the development and achievement of China in some areas, and they're developing plans and major tasks in the future. For example, we know that many people in this country are concerned about the real estate sector. So in the 2nd Minister's Corridor, the Minister of Housing and Urban Rural Development responded that since the beginning of this year, the sales of the commercial housing has ended 13 months of negative growth, and the prices have been stable. He also stressed that the recovery is based on the principle that housing is for living in, not for speculation. Another example, the Minister of Industry and Information said that China will speed up the research and development of 6G technologies and enhance the international cooperation in this sector. And also the Minister of Ecology and Environment told us that China will speed up, improve the carbon reduction, the pollution reduction, and promote the green development. So you can tell, different from the Deputy's Corridor, Minister's Corridor offers an opportunity for us to learn more about the general picture of the country's development from the authorities. And Zhongshi, there's another interesting thing I want to share with you, that, initially the Minister's Corridor was not like what we see today, so formal, so well organized. It used to be a term that used by us media to describe the path from the north gate of the Great Hall of the People to the main hall. And that's where the ministers would enter for the meeting. And in the past, reporters would just stay there, wait there, and try their best to grasp the ministers to ask a question or two. But later on, since 2016, the Minister's Corridor has become a routine of the 2 sessions, so that it's more convenient to raise questions and to get more authoritative messages. And you can also see from this, you can tell that the officials from the country are becoming more confident because they have something to say, they have something to share with the world. So today we're also looking forward to hearing what the 3 ministers are going to tell us. Back to you, Zhongshi.
Oh, Huang Yue, you bet I remember the commotion, the excitement, the vigor back in the day when the Minister's Corridor was in its very original form. What an update, what an upgrade. Thank you so much for that update. And ministers have already met the media twice during this year's session. Take a look at some of the highlights with previous rounds.
Only by making enterprises the main body of scientific and technological innovation, rather than just the main body of the application of technologies, can enterprises participate in the whole process of technological innovation. The Ministry of Science and Technology will further increase support for enterprises to become the main players in scientific and technological innovation. At the same time, the ministry will give full support to any state-owned, private, large, medium, small, and micro enterprises that engage in scientific and technological innovation and we will support them equally in terms of rights, opportunities, and roles.
The practice of past 10 years shows that the modernization of harmonious coexistence between man and nature embodies the essential difference between Chinese modernization and Western modernization. We regard respecting, complying with, and protecting nature as inherent requirements for development, and our country takes ecological protection as a priority in economic development. Also, China sticks to the integrated protection and systematic management of mountains, rivers, forests, while coordinating industrial structure adjustment, pollution control, ecological protection, and response to climate change. All these are models and experiences that developing countries can learn from as they move towards modernization.
To better solve the housing needs of young residents, China will increase the supply of government-subsidized rental housing and accelerate the establishment of long-term rental housing. To better facilitate the healthy development of enterprises, China will take measures to end local protectionism and clear the barriers hindering building a national unified market.
We are expecting the Ministers' Corridor to take place in the next couple of minutes. In the meantime, let me get back to my studio guests here. It's very interesting that our reporter just reminded us of how the Ministers' Corridor came into being today. Back in the days, they were encircled and sometimes ambushed by members of the press and media when everyone wanted to get a quick question answered by those ministers as they moved from one room to the other. So as you can imagine, it was rather chaotic. And then the organizers thought, why don't we have the ministers line up and just take questions from the media? It's very rare access because it's not like you get a press conference with these people every day of the year. So Professor Xiao, what does this members' corridor do in terms of directly addressing the press and the media?
Well, the key word is the transparency of information, even transparency of the ministers themselves. You know, people need to know, as a citizen, we want to know the ministers or the cabinet members who are really kind of responsible for the running of the, the government. We actually want to know to whom we will be addressed or to ask questions in the future, but we hope we don't have any question. So that's kind of one keyword, transparency. And the second, actually, we can have a very clear sense of the logic that innovation becomes habit, and habit becomes this kind of routine. Because this kind of routine comes from those, the habit of this journalism. They want some kind of new information. So this is also good for the governance, law-based governance.
It's a gesture of openness and transparency, and it's proved to be very popular. I enjoy it every time. Einar?
I actually prefer the chaotic one, but I can understand. I mean, you know, these meetings are about messaging. We were talking earlier, you know, you're seeing the very tip of a massive iceberg. And what's really important is to get the message across, not to create drama or to try to catch somebody off guard or, you know, get some sort of conflicting thing happening, things like that. It's interesting, but not necessarily useful if you're trying to, you know, put forward, you know, that this is a cohesive team that has, you know, clear plans, a budget, and we're going to hold them accountable next year. So remember them. I do think having the ministers on, as you know, as you said, the ability to see who is responsible and get a sense of what you think their competency level is, very, very important. In the past, I think ministers weren't used to that. They didn't get in the spotlight that often. But you're seeing a generational change now. The new ministers are very sophisticated, as we said. These are experts, scientists, engineers. And they do have a vision and a lot of expertise to share. And I think that really engenders a lot of confidence.
Just because this happens now in a more organized and streamlined fashion doesn't mean that the ministers are not grilled and challenged by members of the press. You still get to answer your questions, and chances are they don't shy away from difficult questions because you're put on the spot and you're expected to deliver answers that are directly connected to the discipline or the sector that you're in charge of. I remember a lot of ministers are able, it's a generational change, they're obviously very sophisticated, and they are able to make very specific quotations about statistics, numbers, and figures, and that's always very impressive to me. And when people question about the public speaking skills of Chinese officials, here's a presentation for you to see that they can actually address the public and the media very well, which we will get to witness in just a moment. Professor Xia, your take on how this just connects the officials, the ministers, and the public in this way?
Yes, just like you mentioned, it's a very good way to know the competence quality of the ministers. Actually, they are already the senior officials. They are in charge of a certain, let's say, field. For example, the Ministry of Education. They're in charge. The minister is in charge of the the general plan or the general. The implementation of the general strategic plan for the long-term educational policy or educational strategy. So people need to know that in the future, what kind of educational orientation would be. For example, whether there will be new added classes, whether there will be new added, let's say, testing courses. So these are all concerned by, parents. So, and they wanted to know this from the minister. So they know that this minister knows what know what he's doing, knows what his staff are doing. This is good for Chinese people's kind of confidence. So they know that they have a reliable government, they have a competent, official, they have a qualified official. It is good not only for the governance, but also for the social stability.
Yeah. And I would add, in the past, the emphasis was on being a good administrator, being able to bring these groups together and get a consensus and make recommendations and then follow through on them. Now, there is more public relations required. So the new generation of leaders do have to have this other aspect where they can stand up and take whatever comes.
Optics matters.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but in the past, if you went back 10, 15 years ago, all right, very, very different in terms of how some people acted. They were clearly uncomfortable in some instances, but it just wasn't as important back then because the work was different, and that's what I'm saying. It's a dynamic. The world is dynamic. Things change, and what you have to do changes.
And some of the ministers expected to make an appearance are those in charge of natural resources and national statistics. What topics do you expect to come up? For example, with the Minister of Natural Resources, obviously China is keen on further conserving ecology, protecting its environment. What do you expect to come up?
Yes, recently China has contributed a lot in terms of the biodiversity, and this kind of biodiversity, actually China's kind of job and contribution is leading among all the members of the international community. So I wish, what I expect from the Minister of the Natural Resources is how to implement this kind of the biodiversity job with, how to balance to preserve the biodiversity and China's own kind of the resources, and how to make full use of, take full advantage of China's existing resources, so that this resources is not only for preserve, is not only for people to enjoy, to see, but also those resources could be used for the further development for China. For example, some kind of rare earth resources, right? China is full of the rare earth resources, and how to make full use of this kind of thing, how not to waste these resources, right? So that's what we can expect from the Minister of Natural Resources.
Einar, is there anything in particular that you expect to come up?
Well, I'm going to be very interested in the choice of statistics because gathering information, data, everything, very, very, very important. And in the past, I wrote some books, and we talked to the statistics department, and I said, well, how does this work exactly? He says, well, actually, we get a lot of information coming up from the bottom, but we don't believe it because their progress was dependent on creating this image that there is a lot of things going on. So the gathering information, if you are having a planned economy, if you do not have the information, you cannot create solutions. If you cannot define the problem, you have no idea where you're going. So this is very important. So I'll be very interested to hear how he sees the role of statistics within the government, how they're going to gather information, and then how that's going to translate into planning.
What your decision making is depending on those statistics. It's absolutely critical to get them authentic, to get them real, so that you can forge a plan based on those numbers. Professor
Right.
Xia?
Right. Yeah. In different times, in different historical times, and in different circumstances, data is more important than any other information. And actually, data is not only just information. Data is the past. The data is the future. The statistics actually becomes the productivity of further development. Like you just mentioned, to forge a new plan, to correct what we previously didn't expect. So this is all rely on the authentic data, real data. So a national the Statistics Bureau is very important in the China's kind of law-based governance or science-based governance, and even this kind of people-oriented governance, because people can provide the real data rather than what you can get from the website. Okay.
I think we're 30 seconds away from the minister's corridor. Indulge me here. If you were present at the minister's corridor and you had a chance to ask a question to the Minister of Education, what would you ask?
Well, I would. If really I got this chance, I really would like to ask how to, promote further scientific and technological research, not only just for the pure purpose of science, but also for the real practice of China's, the use for the further development. So whether there will be practical, the real strategy, real kind of program. I would like to hear from the minister of this kind of program. Yeah.
What about you, Einar? Very quickly, if you had your choice of minister,
minister,
not necessarily education.
Okay. Well, no, I'd ask him. What do you think are the critical aspects that are necessary for the future? And is China prepared to train the workforce that it needs for this new digital economy?
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Both of you will make great reporters at this scene. I believe in your grilling capabilities, and we're just seconds away from the Minister's Corridor, which will take place at the Great Hall of the People, where high-ranking government officials, ministers, will take questions from the press and the media. Take a look.
Good morning. This is the third ministerial corridor of the first plenary session of the 14th NPC. And today we have three ministers with us to take your questions. They are from the General Administration of Sports, Mr. Gao Zhidan, and Mr. Kang Yi from the State Statistics Bureau, and Minister Wang Guanghua of Natural Resources. And now let's give the floor to Mr. Gao Zhidan from General Administration of Sports. Good morning. Now the floor is open to questions. With Renmin Daily, Minister Gao, after the successful convocation of Beijing Winter Sports, we still have a lot of good memories, and it has left us with abundant legacies. In the Spring Festival, Winter Sports has become a New Year tradition. So, what will the administration do to better meet the growing demand for winter sports of the people? Thank you. After the careful deployment and instruction of General Secretary Xi Jinping, as well as the guidance of the State Council, the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games has been successfully convened, and it has left us with abundant legacies. The winter sports now witness wider coverages among the general public, and we see a larger varieties of winter sports and more abundant ways to participate. In the Spring Festival, we have seen that some of the skiing grounds has become popular traveling destinations. In the post-Olympic time and period, we will continue to promote winter sports to wider range in the country and territory, and continue to consolidate the basis for participation of winter sports, hoping that about 300 million people will be participating in winter sports. The relevant ministries and administrations will be setting up special posts for winter sports in schools at primary and secondary levels. And we will also discuss new ways to encourage more students to participate in winter sports. We provide them with professional guidance and services. At the same time, we will also be creating more employment opportunities that have been cultivated in the Beijing Olympic cycle. Second, we will continue to improve the level of public services of winter sports, including the organization of winter sports season, winter games, and venues for winter sports that are close to the people, so that more people will be willing and will have access to these facilities. And three, we will stress safety in the process and make sure that the whole industry is safe and has a wider coverage among the general public. After the Beijing 2022 Winter Sports, the competition of winter sports in China has already entered the center stage of the world. We will continue to keep that momentum so that the winter sports can continue to win honors for our countries. In the past winter sports season, we have been gaining new grounds in some of the fields that are very strange to us, or we do not have a lot of brilliant historical records of in the past. But now we see major improvements in all of these fields. A lot of talents have been cultivated to better prepare us for the Milan cycle. We will continue to improve the sustainability of the winter sports venues of the Beijing Games and continue to be the host for winter sports international competitions, strengthen our cooperation with foreign countries and organizations, so that we can better tell the winter sports, the Chinese version of winter sports, and continue to consolidate our achievements and influence of us in the international winter sports stage. Winter sports is not only a means for us to gain honors, but also to improve the well-being of the people. Now we see a rising passion of the general public in this regard, and people are now gearing up for the winter sports and winter sports season. And sure enough, people would have a higher demand for the service quality of winter sports. Therefore, we have to treat the ice and snow of our country as another important natural resources, so as to better connect the demand with our supply of sports resources, so as to promote the development of winter sports industry and stimulate the consumption in this field. We will also be supporting the manufacturing industry for winter sports equipment, expand the scope of winter sports performance, encourage the development of new rising fields, so that the benefit for the development of winter sports can be better enjoyed by the people and contribute to economic and social development in general. With Beijing Weekly.
Thank you. 好，我是中国外文局美洲中心北京周报社的记者。
So football, volleyball, and basketball are warmly welcomed by the people, very popular sports. So people focus a lot on the development in this regard. But the performance of Chinese players in these three sports are not so ideal at the moment. So what are your plans next? Football, basketball, and volleyball is a collective sport event and highly influential in the world stage, and they are the most popular sports, especially among young people and teenagers. The performance of the national team on these three sports are not only a demonstration of national strength, but also an embodiment of collectivism and patriotism. In our history, these three sports, especially the women's event, has won major prizes and honors for our country. China's women's football team has won the runner-up for Olympics as well as Asian Games. The China's women's basketball team is one of the top teams in the 80s and 90s and won honors in the Olympics as well as World Championship. Last year, it won the runner-up for the World Cup, showing the sport spirit of perseverance, advancement. In training, they have fostered the spirits of Chinese women's volleyball team. They are the top team in many of the world's volleyball events. And their fighting spirit and integrity, as well as their spirit of cooperation, has been a guiding spirit and a great source of inspiration for people of one generation after another, and contributing to this national rejuvenation. However, to be honest, for a very long time, the men's team of these three sports are not doing so well, especially the men's football team. But at the same time, we also have seen a lot of scandals in the football arena. This is a sharp contrast when it comes to the high expectations of the CP Central Committee as well as the general public. So it is our major task to promote development of these three sports. Recently, some of the scandals have made the headlines again in the football field. And we are now studying measures to address these problems. We plan to make progress in the following aspects, including, first of all, the spirit of a long march will be exerted in these three fields. We will be taking strict measures to tackle the difficulties, especially the most difficult problems in terms of their spirit and mindset. We will continue our efforts to change this kind of setbacks in our work. We will also be cracking down the corruption and other malpractices in the football field, so that system can be better optimized and the system can be restored and be geared back to the right track. Football and basketball transformation is being deepened. So we are now facing daunting tasks in terms of the reform of these fields. We will continue along this road of reform, innovation, and development, and continue to liberate our mind and stick to innovation so as to build a better system for management, human resources, training, and competition, as well as logistics. We will continue to optimize the development path for the three sports with Chinese characteristics. We must take the problems head on and consolidate our confidence and have a better and thorough understanding of the general plan for the development of the Chinese football, so as to further optimize the system and strengthen capacity building of the three sports. We must stay committed to the path of reform of the three sports. It is our task to consolidate the basis for the three sports, as well as the human resources talent pool for the three sports, start at a very young age, so that our systematic advantage can be in full play and the market mechanism can be fully used. Football in the campus and schools must be focused on. And we also need to strengthen the backup human resources of the sports.
We must work from the grassroots level to actively support and cultivate those youth football clubs' development. In terms of policies, budgets, and talents pool, we will steer more toward the social football development, so that the professional football games and the social football development could be emphasized at the same time. So at the grassroots level, we will continue to improve the competition system and professional contest mechanism so as to pave the way for the development of those young talents, starting from the on-campus football to social football clubs to professional football games. Those talents could be well cultivated and have a green pathway to be professionals. And as to establish the pool of talents, we must be down to earth to create such a pathway for the growth of those backup talents, so as to rejuvenate Chinese football for the long run. Next question. Thank you. From Shandong TV, in the report of the 20th National Congress, the mass fitness campaign was advocated, and in 2019, in the guideline for developing the strong power of sports, it mentioned that the mass fitness campaign is one of the key priorities to support the Health China implementation. So what has been done by the administration of sports as to that? Thank you for the question. Ever since the 18th National Congress, the CPC Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping as its core, pay high attention to people's public health and fitness development. So mass fitness has been elevated to a national policy. Encouraging mass fitness and promoting public health are highly integrated. The general public had a higher sense of attainment and satisfaction. mass fitness campaign is relevant to each and every one of us. It also matters greatly to the health condition of our public. Participating in exercises and boosting our health conditions have become the incentive of all public. And in recent years, with the leadership of the government and the joint efforts of all authorities, mass fitness has been booming with more favorable environment. First of all, the places of fitness have been put in place. The number of fitness places has been rising up. We greatly encourage the establishment of sports parks, the fitness centers, and the walkways, and other fitness projects. Those facilities are all around the general public. In that way, we fill in the loophole of mass fitness. At county, village, and township levels, the three-tiered public health network has been introduced. At the grassroots level, we have filling the blank in terms of facilities development. By the end of 2022, the per capita exercise area has been 26,000 square kilometers. That was a huge boost from 10 years ago. According to the statistics, the rural areas fitness projects coverage has been increased as well, a great deal. Secondly, the quality of facilities has been improved continuously. With the improved quality of fitness facilities steadily, at urban and rural level, we have established a series of very practical fitness and exercise places with higher level of intelligence. Everyone can locate a diversified supply of higher quality facilities in a premium environment. As to the elderly and the young children's fitness development, there have been some very friendly exercise places. Third, the business hours of those stadiums and the quality of those public stadiums has been improved. We tried very hard to conquer the difficulties as to the opening of those big stadiums. All levels of sports authorities and financial bureaus have come up with different measures to make breakthroughs as to that question. And the budget is about very high from the central level to support the opening of 2,500 stadiums to benefit 1,400 different counties. Those stadiums will be open to the public for free. By optimizing the service standards of those public stadiums and increasing the business hours of those stadiums, we keep improving the quality of service in those public stadiums, generating higher level of satisfaction from the masses. This year, we also plan to initiate the mass fitness public place improvement campaign with an aim to provide higher level of places for mass fitness. Here, I would also love to share with you about the exercises of the youth. Sports exercises can build the youngsters' bodies and cultivate their sense of health. Exercising is a good way for the sound growth of youngsters. According to the report of the 20th National Congress, we must strengthen our requirements of sports activities, and we must implement that spirit by enhancing the top-level design for the exercise of the youth. For example, we could work on the both fronts, including the on-campus activities and the professional sports activities. We will try to popularize the knowledge of sports and exercise, and together with the other authorities, our administration will convene several professional and thematic competitions and sports activities so that more youngsters would be mobilized to exercise their bodies. That would help the youngsters to reduce their weight and protect their eyesight. The youngsters could also cultivate a good living habit. Then, we aim for healthy development of those young children. Thank you, Mr. Gao.
Now let's invite the second minister, Kang Yi, from the State Statistics Bureau. The floor is open to questions. From Xinhua News Agency. Thank you. Good morning, Minister Kang. As we know, in 2022, China's economy has borne the hit of different factors to stabilize the overall economy. And this year, because of the turn of events as to the pandemic, it seems that our economy is looking up. What's your take about it? And since there are still some remaining uncertainties in China and abroad, what's your take about this year's economic landscape? Thank you for the questions. As to the macro economy, we are all very concerned. In 2022, as the reporter has mentioned, we attempted to maintain the overall stability of our economic situation. If we look at the overall macro economy, we could wrap it up as follows. Macroeconomy has been stabilized in general. We achieved that, but it's hard-won result. And that achievement demonstrates resilience of Chinese economy. It also paves the way for our economic performance this year. Usually we look at the employment, the CPI, and international revenue and expenditure, and the GDP growth rates when we look at the overall economy. And the total aggregate was 121 trillion. And per capita GDP was $12,700. As to the commodity price, it was a huge contrast to the international average because it was only 2% in China. And as to employment, by the end of last year, unemployment ratio was as low as 5.5%. As to international revenue and expenditure, it was kept steady as well. In particular, as to the forex of RMB, compared to the huge fluctuations of forex of other major currencies in the world, RMB seems to maintain very steady fluctuation. And our forex reserve was about 3 trillion. Those achievements are very hard won, because we all did our best last year against all the uncertainties.
From the outside, there have been some geopolitical conflicts, dealing huge shocks to the international economy, Chinese economy included. Added by the repeated occurrence of the epidemic, we had very hard times last year. Besides, natural disasters broke out. The extreme heat and drought and lack of water were daunting us. And those achievements are worth commendation. And we performed pretty well, even if on the international stage. We minimized our cost as to the containment of the pandemic. We have tried our best to maintain people's health and safety. 3% growth is higher than that of the US, which is 2.1%, and 1.8% in Germany. And CPI is performing well. With steady price, we could have well-controlled inflation performance as well. Those numbers manifest that China's economy is very resilient. With so many shocks and difficulties, we made it. And we endured huge pressure to prove that our economy can respond to many risks and challenges. It was extraordinary last year. And we accumulated many macro regulation experience.
And the results of those macro control measures will serve as a good condition for future modulations and macro control, and also give us more room for maneuvers in the future. So these are the 5 aspects of our national economy of last year. In 2023, what path will the Chinese economy take? According to the Central Economic Conference, the economic situation of China is now turning for the better, and our target for this year's economic growth is about 5%. We are fully confident that we will achieve that goal. And the big picture of this year's macroeconomic development will be satisfactory, and our confidence comes from 2 aspects. First, is based on the long-term judgment of our national economy. And second, this is made according to some of the latest statistics of the Q1 of this year. In the mid and long run, China is still a developing economy, and our per capita economic indicator still faces major gaps compared to developed countries. So we have big rooms for development as well as a vast market to be tapped in. We need to further improve our supply of laborers, and we also have favorable conditions for production, and our very good momentum for economic development has not changed. But we are facing challenges as we did before. A lot of experts from home and abroad are carefully studying the future development of the Chinese economy. According to our information, 5% is the general projection of China's economic growth this year. So about 80% of the agencies are making similar predictions and projections. So this is a very fair judgment and projection. And 5% will take the Chinese economy back to its normal track of development. We believe that expectations and confidence of the market will also be turning for the better this year. And on March the 1st, we issued some of the major indicators in manufacture. Our purchases indicator is 52.6, which creates a high in a very a high level in quite a long time, which shows that the public are now restoring confidence of the economy. We also see some projections of international organizations, and they also have been making more optimistic projection of the numbers of the Chinese economy. Since February, a lot of global organizations are making better judgment and gearing up their numbers for the projection of world economy because of the restoration of the Chinese economy. So we now can see brighter prospects for the world economy as well, which is attributable to the recovery of the Chinese economy. And second, we also see some real numbers concerning such as railway transportation and power generation. We see better numbers in all of those aspects mentioned above. And third, we also have some follow-up indicators and see these indicators improving in Q1, including the industrial added value, commodity sales, and service industry index. The Bureau will be issuing the latest number on 15th of March, so please stay tuned with us. We believe that the national economy is now turning for the better, so we are fully confident of the 5% target. However, we cannot ignore some of the challenges and uncertainties ahead of us. And we are facing an even more complex international situation environment. And we also have some deeply embedded paradoxes and problems in the national economy and at domestic level. A lot of the businesses are facing difficulties. We are also experiencing pressure in employment and income distribution. There are also some deep-seated problems in our national economy. And coming up, we will be acting according to the instructions of the National Economic Conference as well as the government work report, and continue to promote high-quality development and form a new landscape for economic development. We believe that with the synergy and joint effort of the whole country, we are facing very bright prospects in terms of national economy, and our economy will surely be turning for the better. Next question.
谢谢。封面新闻记者提问，局长您好，我们知道高质量发展是全面建设社会主义现代化国家的主要任务。
is an important task for building China into a modern socialist country. So, what are our improvements in this regard, and what are our future plans?
好，谢谢你的提问。
Thank you.
高质量发展是我们全面建设
Economic high-quality development is the first priority of building China into a modern socialist country. Last year, In terms of promoting high-quality development, we made progress despite the difficulties. Our directions has not been changed, and our efforts are relentless and unswerving, so we made major breakthroughs, especially in innovation. We now have higher driving forces, including the investment of NRD. Last year, it exceeds 3 trillion RMB, accounting for 2.55% of the national GDP, which is close to OECD level, which reflects that China now has a more advanced level in terms of innovation index. We are one of the top countries, including in terms of innovation, and ranking has risen from 12 to 11 at the international level, and we produce major innovative results. Second, coordinated development. The structure of the national economy as the regional balance has been better managed. For example, in terms of industrial structure, the manufacturing industry last year takes up 27%, which is up by 0.2 percentage point compared to the previous year. In terms of the momentum of economic growth, last year, domestic demand contribute to 82% of the national economy, up by 4.8 percentage points compared to the previous year, which has become the major driving force for economic growth. We believe that urbanization has reached a 65% among other indicators. So the income gap between rural and urban residents has been further reduced, and the income growth for rural areas outpaced that of urban areas, and that of the western regions outpaced that of the eastern regions. Green development also see promising results, including energy consumption. Last year, we see a price hike in the international market. Coal as the major source, natural resources of energy in China. Our consumption is up by 4.3%, but the per capita consumption is down by 0.1 percentage points. We also see an improvement of air quality, water quality, as well as the soil quality. The PM 2.5 and its intensity in major cities is down by 3.3 percentage points. Our door of opening up has been wider, and we are welcoming more friends to join hands with us. We see some commerce and institutions and businesses that have been choosing China as their destination of investment. The BRI investment is up by 19.4% last year. We're still the biggest trader in the world. And this year, the General Customs has already issued the latest number. Before the announcement, there are projections that the numbers might not look very good, saying that we may see this kind of nosedive of China's foreign trade. However, the numbers turned out to be very good. Our foreign trade is only down by 0.8 percentage points, and the export is actually up by 0.9%, which it's a clear embodiment of China's opening up policy. Last but not least, in terms of social security, we also made major improvements. The labor force, total number of labor force in China is 700 million people. This is a massive market, but no unemployment risks, major unemployment risks were reported last year. And the income of the residents is basically in line with the growth of national economy, which is a clear embodiment that our policies concerning the well-being of the people are very effective. So high-quality development will be the priority for developing China into a modernist social country. And in the discussion with the Jiangsu delegation, the General Secretary also pointed out that this is a major driving force for economic development. We should continue to take this as our priority and major task so that the benefits of economic development and opening up can be enjoyed by the wider public. We believe that these policies will be better implemented and the instructions will be better performed, especially in terms of the handling of the quality of development as well as the speed.
As you may have noticed, the expressions in many central government documents have changed about improving the quality and efficiency to have reasonable growth. So quality has been given top priority as well as efficiency. As we are implementing the instructions of high-quality growth, I do believe that high-quality development will be realized as scheduled in China among the overall development of Chinese modernization. In that way, we can truly practice the high-quality and highly efficient development, thus supporting the recovery of our overall economy and modernization target of China. Thank you. Next question.
From Shenzhen TV.
Minister Kang, as we know, statistics is one important basic task for economic and social development. So, what's your plan about statistics reform and development in the future, and what are going to be the priorities of your work this year? Thank you for the questions, and thank you all the more for your attention paid to the work of statistics. As is known to all, statistics is the fundamental work for our economic and social development. Statistics must always serve the economic and social development. This year, we will see the beginning year of implementing the instructions from the 20th National Congress. In the future, we will continue to work around the overall requirements of economic and social development. So this year, our priorities of statistics work is to serve the Chinese modernization drive and to facilitate the reform of modernization. To that end, we must first of all change our mindset of statistics. In particular, We must learn from the overseas premium experience, as well as the cutting-edge philosophies of statistics. More importantly, we will try to organize the previous years of practices in China so that we can give out the Chinese voice of statistics. As to formulating the international statistics rules and standards, we must improve the influence and representation of China. Secondly, we will reform the statistics system. We will focus on the Chinese modernization, and we will scale up the scope of statistics work and enrich the contents of our statistics. In that way, we will formulate a brand new statistics system. So this year, the Chinese modernization supervision system for statistics will be put in place. We will try to calculate the carbon emissions as well as common prosperity. We will also work harder on the improvement of people's livelihood. Thirdly, we will try to change the production way of statistics. Especially, we must follow the trend of the big data development and the digital development, as well as informatization. We will better harness the power of the remote sensing technology, big data, blockchain technology, and others. Fourth, we will improve the statistics system. We will unify the system nationwide and strengthen the national leadership. We will improve the tiered system so that we could be cohesive in statistics work. Of course, there are a good many priorities. For one thing, we must adhere to the high quality of statistics, which is the lifeline. Only with high accuracy and completeness of the statistics can we timely reflect the economic and social conditions. So the quality of data must be improved. But we must be aware that in certain places there have been some fraudulent numbers and data which require the higher level of legal execution and penalties. We will crack down upon those illegal behaviors. There will be a dedicated campaign as to fraudulent data this year. We aim to ensure that all of those data outputs will be traceable and reliable. Secondly, we will carry out the fifth census. As we know, economic census is like a physical examination for a nation. This is the first time we carry out the economic census ever since the wrap-up of the 20th National Congress. In the census this year, we will also have some simultaneous investment and outputs investigation. We hope to have a clear idea about the aggregate and the distribution. We must also clarify the structure and relationships among all the factors. This is quite a heavy task for all of us. Now, the registered market players stand at the number of 170 million. So we must do the census as to those market players. in different industries. According to the arrangement of the CPC Central Committee and the State Council, we will complete this job industriously. And here, I sincerely call upon our media groups to continue to publicize and report about those work this year. And we welcome all the media friends to pay more attention to all the statistics we provided and play a good supervision role. We hope that with the public supervision, we can continue to improve the quality of data. Thank you, Minister Kang. Next, let's invite the third minister, Minister Wang Guanghua of Natural Resources. The floor is open. From CMG.
谢谢主持人，中央广播电视总台记者提问。
Thank you.
王部长您好，3月5
Good
号，
morning,
习近
Minister
平
Wang.
总书记在参
On
加
March the
江苏
5th,
代表团省议
when
政府工作
President
报
Xi
告时，
Jinping
特别
reviewed
强
the
调
work
了粮
report
食
in
安全，
Jiangsu
强
province,
调耕地
he
保护是
emphasized
国之
about
大者。
food
所以想
security
请问自然
and
资源
the
部
importance
在
of
接下
arable
来
land
将采取
protection.
哪
So,
些
what
具
will
体
be the
措
measures
施
taken
来
by the
牢牢
Ministry
地
of
守
Natural
住18
Resources
亿
to
亩
hold
耕
on
地
to the
红线？
1.8
谢谢您。
billion mu of
好，
arable
谢谢你
land?
的提问，各位
Thank you for the
媒体
question.
记者朋友们，
And dear
大家中
media
午好。
friends, good noon.
自然资源部呢是
The Ministry of
2018
Natural
年党
Resources
和国家机构改革中
was established
重构
in
性组建的部门，我们
2018
的工作职
after
责是
the government
严守资源
institutional
安全底
reform.
线，优
Our
化
bottom line
国土
is
空
to
间
hold
格
on
局，
to the red line
促
of
进
natural resources and
低碳
optimize
发展，
the homeland
维护资源自
services
产权益
and。to safeguard
那
the
么
rights and interests
这个总
of
书记呢，对耕
resources
地保
and
护这项
assets.
工作
General
一
Secretary
直
Xi Jinping
都
has
非常关心。
always put high
总
premium
书记
on
讲，
arable land
耕
protection.
地
According to
是
him,
粮食生
arable
产的
land
命根子。
is the red
强调
line of
中国
grain
人的饭
outputs.
碗，
He
任何时候
emphasized
都
that
要牢牢
we
地
must always bear in mind
端在自己
food
手上。
security
那么
and be
前几天
independent.
参加这个
Days
江
ago,
苏代表团审议的时候，
He
再次强
reviewed
调
the Jiangsu
耕地保护
delegation
是国之
during
大
the
者，
two sessions, and he
耕地的面积
reiterated
产
that
量不能再
arable
减
land
少。
production is
自然资
of
源部
great
呢，
significance
坚
to
决
the
贯彻
country,
落
and
实
the
总书记的
arable land area
指
could
示精
never
神，
be reduced anymore.
坚持最严格
And
的
our
耕地
ministry
保护
has
制度。
implemented those
那么我们今
instructions
年呢，
by
首
conforming
先
to
要
the
做好
most
以下3件
stringent
事情。
arable land
第一
protection.
件事情
This year,
就
there
是要
will be
稳
three
住总量。
priorities. First, to
去年
stabilize the overall
党中央
supply
国务院
of arable land.
正式印
Last
发了
year,
全国
CPC
国
Central
土空
Committee
间规划纲要
published the
2021至2035，
National
明确
Land Protection
18.65
Plan,
亿亩
identifying
耕地
that
和
1.85
15.46亿亩永久
arable
基本农
land
田
and
保护目标任
1.5
务。
billion
这个呢，
permanent
要
farmland must
保
be
持到
protected
2035年不变。
until
我们在接下来的
2035.
审核、审
In the
批、
future, there will be
省
rounds
市
of
县
review, approval
3级国土空
at
间规划
county
的过程
level,
当中，要
municipal
将上述
level,
这个目标
and
逐级
provincial
分解
level.
下达，落实
And
到
there will be a division of
湖畔和
labor
地
in
块。
terms of implementing
这
those
是
targets.
第一件事情。
That's the first
第二个事情
priority
呢，
of
就
this
是要
year.
优化布
Secondly,
局。
we will optimize
今年呢，
the
我们
landscape.
将通过采取
This year,
耕地
we will adopt certain
奖
measures.
惩、经济奖惩的
For
措施，
example, with the incentive and
促使南
disincentive
方的
targeting
部分
at the arable
省
land
份
protection to
有序恢复
encourage the
一部分
southern provinces
流
to
失的
resume some of the
优质耕地。
already lost
那
fine
么
arable land.
这样的话呢，可以有效的遏制
In that
北
way,
粮南运这种势头
we
进一
can
步加剧。
curb the worsening
件事情呢，
of
就是
the grain
要
production
落实或者压实
more
责
in the
任。
south instead of the
那么在
north.
耕地保护上，
Third,
各
accountability
级
system.
党委政府
As to
负有
arable
主
land
体责任。
protection, all levels
相关部
of
门负有
party
监管责任。
authorities and
接下来，
government authorities are
我们将
responsible.
共同
So there will be
签订
supervision as to
耕地
their
保
work.
护责任书。
We will sign
这个
to their
按照中央的要求，每
responsibilities,
年进行考核，
and according to the central
突破
government
耕地红
requirement,
线
there
的
will be annual performance
要一票否决，
evaluation.
从而
If they break the rules as to arable land protection, there will be a veto. And their responsibilities as to serving the party and the nation will be cancelled. And we must pay special attention to the following. Firstly, the increment of arable land for the purpose of construction or the restructuring of agriculture. The occupation of arable land must be strictly controlled. If they do need the occupation of arable land, then we must aim at balance. For example, agricultural restructuring, there must be a balance between input and output. And secondly, we must revitalize the available assets to minimize the occupation of arable land and conserve the land resources. We will take certain measures to peg the increment to the available resources, and we will improve the outputs per area. And we will try to strike a balance between the on-land and underground resources. And with assets and technologies input, we will try to save more arable land. Thirdly, law enforcement strictly. We will usher in some penalties. With zero tolerance system, we will crack down upon those occupation behaviors of arable land. And for those illegal projects, the quota for their arable land distribution will be cancelled. In that way, we can continue the replenishment of arable land, and there will be no further reduction of arable land area, as required by General Secretary Xi. We will also work together with legislation. With stringent legal system, we will encourage arable land protection to ensure food security. As our media friends mentioned, with the recent years' efforts, the overall supply of arable land seems to be well protected with the controlled further reduction of the land area. In 2 years' time, there has been a consecutive increase of arable land area. But we must continue the good efforts to maintain the results. And we are convinced that with the government support and all levels of government efforts and the support of the media friends and all other circles, I believe we can certainly conform to the red line of 1.8 billion arable land area.
请西区后排着黑色西装的男记者提问。
好，谢谢主持人。王部长你好，东方卫视记者提问。我们都说石油是工业的血液，矿产是工业的粮食。中央经济工作会议和政府工作报告中都提到了要加强重要的能源、矿产资源的国内勘探的开发和增值上场。请问针对这方面的内容，自然资源部在接下来有哪些部署和安排？谢谢。
According to the General Secretary, the mining resources are major material basis for economic and social development, so the detection and exploration is an important task for the development of our country. According to the report of the 20th National Congress, this kind of strategic resources has to be guaranteed. Currently, in China, we have high dependence concerning some important mining resources, and the demand for some of the major mining resources concerning the manufacture of new materials is also increasing. Therefore, it is our task to improve supply of these mining resources so as to make sure that the industrial chain and supply chain of major mining resources are secured. Our work is as follows. First, to kickstart the first round of mine searching campaign, and we have stipulated the 14th five-year plan concerning mining detection, and our focus will be the strategic mining resources in our territory, and hopefully we can add a new batch of mining bases on the list. Second, we are hoping to optimize the investment scheme that can attract social capital to join this process, to join this industry. Policies will be issued to create a more favorable market environment, attracting social capital to invest and join this mining searching process. For example, this comprehensive mining detection campaign has to be coordinated with the mining location situation of China. We need to lift the restrictions for the strict categorization of mining resources, because in China, one of the characteristics is that we have a lot of accompanying mines that are very close to the major mining resources. We also will be opening up a tier 2 market for mining resources, so as to attract more businesses to invest in this process. So we are aiming at mines that are of higher quality and bigger scale. 3, we will further be optimizing the taxing scheme for the transfer of mining owning rights. And we will be making adjustment to that policy, and the taxation scheme will be based on the annual income of the mines, so as to make sure that the national interest will not be undermined. And we'll also be reducing the burdens for the mining industries. Besides, we will also be strengthening the technological support for mining industry and detection. According to the instructions of the General Secretary, we will be digging deeper into the earth, speeding up the efforts of major technological innovation projects, and strengthen our research of the basic scientific research, so as to make major breakthroughs in terms of mining detection. We also need to solve the bottleneck problems in terms of mining and exploration, so that to make sure that most of the major equipment are made in China. Thank you. Next question.
请光明日报记者提问。
谢谢主持人，来自光明日报记者提问。王部长您好，今天是我们国家的植树节。 习近平总书记在参加首都义务植树活动时曾经强调，要牢固树立绿水青山就是金山银山的理念，加强生态保护和修复。今年政府工作报告也提出，持续实施重要生态系统保护和修复重大工程。下一步，自然资源部将通过哪些重大的举措来推动这项工作？
take in terms of ecological conservation and restoration?
今天是我国第45个植树节。
Today is a special day for arbor planting and also an important landmark for ecological conservation in China.
总书记从18大以来
Since the 18th National Congress, the General Secretary has been participating in the Arbor Day activities every year, showcasing his strong commitment of building China into a more ecologically friendly country. So our work is done under the instruction of the State Council, the Central Committee, and the State Council. So our ecological conservation and restoration work is a priority to us. Last year, we have made some major progress. For example, we are among the first countries to make the proposal that we need to safeguard the red line of arable land. We have built the national park system that is second to none in the world. We also have organized 44 protection projects that helps preserve natural resources, including forest, water, and desert, and prevent desertification. And the area for deserts has been reduced for 2 consecutive years now. We have made major achievements in this regard. And coming up, we will continue to base our strategies on the national strategy of building a beautiful and more environmentally friendly China. First, protection comes first. We will continue to gear up the efforts in terms of national park construction. We know that we have natural reserves for pandas, for the rivers, regions, and among other 5 national parks. We will also be carrying out our plan according to our strategies in Qingling and Yellow River and natural reserves for the Asian elephants and so on. This year, we will also be speeding up this effort of the stipulation of the national park law. We will also ensure that the natural reserves can be better protected by laws. And second, we need to carry out more systematic protection. We will deploy a batch of major projects concerning ecological conservation. We all know that our environmental protection projects are evaluated as top 10 ecological conservation flagship projects by the United Nations. This is a new name card for China's ecological conservation effort and also the Chinese solution to the environmental protection mechanism. And this year, we will continue to carry out projects at the Tibetan Plateau and the Yangtze River as well as the Yellow River. And a batch of new projects will also be issued and initiated. Besides, the coastal line protection and restoration must go hand in hand with the protection of other areas, especially the protection of wetland at the coastal area and the invasion of foreign species. We also will be making better use of the deserted mining pits and locations. 3, we must carry out scientific greening projects for forestation. We need to improve the function for ecological system and improve the diversity of our ecological system. Thank you, Minister Wang. Friends from the press, that concludes the Minister's Corridor of this session. Thank you.
And that is the Minister's Corridor at the Great Hall of the People, where 3 ministers took a total of 9 questions from reporters addressing issues in China's sports development, national statistics, and natural resources. And watching the corridor with us in the studio are Professor Xia Lu and Mr. Einar Tangen. We don't have a lot of time left. Can I just briefly get your overall impression of the corridor today?
Well,
Professor?
it's very kind of a lot of information provided by the three ministers, and I think they know what they are doing. They know what they have to do, and they know their job. Especially the Minister of Natural Resources, and he actually focuses on the security level in terms of the natural resources reservation, and it is key to China's further development.
Einar?
Well, it was all three of them talked about holding the government to higher standards. They're going to crack down in terms of corruption in sports. They're in terms of people playing with the arable land. That's going to be broken. In terms of statistics, he also said anybody who's putting out false statistics is going to be punished. So it's very clear that the government is holding itself to a higher standard, and that is going to be an important part of how they go forward in terms of governments. And this is very important. If you're not holding yourself to a higher standard, how can you expect others to rise to a standard? So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Einar, Professor Xiao, we appreciate your expertise and analysis as always. Thank you so much for coming in today. And with that, we come to the end of our special coverage on the 5th plenary meeting of the first session of the 14th NPC. I'm Zhongshi in Beijing. Don't go anywhere. Global Watch is up next.